protocol kind of having been established, I just want to recognize representatives of the various permanent secretaries, Ministry of Public Service, Transport, Information and Utilities Regulation, Ministry of Education, Youth Development, Sports and Digital Transformation, Ministry of Finance, Department of Gender Affairs, Department of Economic Development. Chief Executive Officer of the Water and Sewage Company Incorporated, Mrs. Zilta George Leslie, managers and staff of WASCO, Executive Director, OIS representative of the Water Resource Management Agency, representatives of Invest Saint Lucia, the Saint Lucia Air and Seaports Authority, Saint Lucia Manufacturers Association, the Saint Lucia Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture, and the Saint Lucia Bureau of Standards. And of course, the water trucking service operators, photovoltaic installers, and any customer group representatives. My fellow commissioners, the Chief Executive Officer of the NURC, Mrs. Skeeter Gibbs, and other members of the staff of the NURC, and of course, our consultant, Diego Fernandez, who's online. Ladies and gentlemen, I bid you a good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this stakeholder consultation on the submission and review of the Water and Sewage Company Incorporated's triennial tariff review application. Today's engagement marks an important step in the Commission's review of WASCO'S application for adjustments to water and sewage rates for the triennium 2024 to 2027. This review is conducted in accordance with the triennial tariff application review principles set out in the Water and Sewage Act, Cap 9.03, as amended by the NURC Act No. 3 of the revised laws of Saint Lucia 2022. The Commission's regulatory framework is firmly grounded in its legislative mandate, which defines its responsibilities with respect to price setting and identifies the factors to which special consideration must be given. The legislation also provides guidance on broader regulatory matters, including the establishment of principles and methodologies for determining utility rates. Since the establishment of the NURC in 2016, the Commission has never had reason to conduct a full triennial rate review for water and sewage services. As such, this process represents a significant milestone and an opportunity to establish a strong and enduring foundation for the economic regulation of the sector. Notably, water and wastewater tariffs were last reviewed in 2013, more than 10 years ago, by the former National Water and Sewage Commission. In carrying out this review, the NURC is required to assess WASCO'S submission, including its business plan, investment plan, accounting information, and other supporting documents, in accordance with the procedures outlined in the Water and Sewage Act, Section 79, and the Water and Sewage Tariff Regulations. Central to this assessment is the Commission's obligation to ensure that the interests of customers are duly considered and that tariffs appropriately reflect the cost of efficiently providing service. Consistent with its legislative responsibilities, the Commission is also required to consult with stakeholders. The NURC remains committed to openness, transparency, and meaningful engagement, and has designed a consultation strategy comprising 3 key elements. Firstly, an intermediary outreach, which comprises targeted consultations and meetings with key stakeholders, such as this, a media campaign including timely newspaper articles and appearances across television, radio, and social media platforms, and lastly, public at-large outreach involving consultations and question and answer sessions in several major communities across the island. Through these avenues, The Commission seeks to encourage broad participation and to keep stakeholders informed throughout the review process. The NURC firmly believes that transparency and openness are essential to regulatory accountability and legitimacy. Independent regulation carries with it a responsibility to be accountable. And we therefore welcome your engagement, participation, and your support as we undertake this very important exercise. It is in this same spirit of inclusion and collaboration that you have been invited to participate in today's consultation. We are confident that your contributions, both during this session and through formal submissions in the days ahead, will assist the Secretariat and the consulting team in arriving at a transparent, balanced, and equitable final determination that serves the interests of customers while reflecting the true cost of delivering the service. Again, I must emphasize that stakeholder consultation is central to sound regulatory decision-making, and we sincerely appreciate the time you have taken from your demanding schedules to be part of this process. I look forward to your active participation today and to your continued engagement as the Commission fulfills its legislative mandate throughout the triennial tariff review. I thank you.
Very much, Mr. Nove. He's actually the chairman of NURC. I did not give him his designation earlier. So thank you, and setting the stage for this meeting. And what you did say, Mr. Nove, is that this is the kind of activity that is required for what we would say is the kind of legitimacy we want to develop in these kinds of activities. So thank you again, and we do hope that you will participate fully in the discussions. At this point, let me invite the legal a presentation by Ms. Skeeter, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Utilities Regulatory Commission, on the legal framework, scope, and strategy of this activity. So here we go, Ms. Skeeter.
Good morning to all. I would like to observe the protocol which has already been established, so I will move straight into the presentation this morning. By way of outline, I will describe the legislative framework governing the tariff review process, the importance of tariff regulation, the NURC's role in the tariff review process, and lastly, an overview of the tariff process. The Water and Sewage Act, Chapter 9.03, establishes the legal framework for regulating water supply and sewage services in Saint Lucia. Section 79 of the Act speaks to 3 types of tariff reviews which shall be carried out by the Commission in relation to the service of a service licensee, in this case the Water and Sewage Company, WASCO. The first type of review would be an annual review, which allow for simple adjustments to be made to the rates based on an indexation mechanism which recognizes the changes in labor rates, energy prices, the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, and also the US Producer Price Index over the preceding 12-month period. Secondly, we have the triennial tariff review, which is conducted every 3 years, and that type of review would be a more comprehensive review of the various elements of the rate-making process. And then we have the extraordinary tariff review, which these reviews are undertaken at any time outside of the scheduled annual or triennial period if unforeseen events such as a hurricane, a major economic shock occurs, warranting an adjustment to the tariff framework. Section 81 of the Water and Sewage Act specifically addresses the matter of the triennial tariff review, which is the subject of today's proceedings. Pursuant to Part 3 of the regulations, WASCO is obligated to submit to the NURC its proposed tariff rates along with the estimated revenue requirement and all necessary supporting documentation prior to the commencement of the triennial review process. This submission must provide the NURC with sufficient information to assess and verify the proposed tariffs and to determine whether they are reflective of a reasonably incurred cost of service and also a reasonable return on capital in accordance with regulatory standards. So, as the chairman indicated earlier in his address, the last such review, which was an extraordinary review, was undertaken in 2013. So it's over 10 years since WASCO last received a review to their tariff rates. And in 2013, they received a 66.15 rate increase, 10.43 of which was allocated to the dredging of the John Compton Dam, and 55.72% representing the new rate. So the rate for sewage, was also increased by 50.8% in 2013. I will now give an overview of the importance of tariff regulation. Firstly, it ensures affordability for consumers while maintaining the financial viability of the service provider. It is also crucial for ensuring equity of water and sewage services, thereby ensuring that the rates are affordable and persons from all socio-economic groups have access to potable water. It also promotes conservation and the efficient use of water resources. And efficiency is essential to ensure the sustainable development of Saint Lucia. Tariff regulation also encourages investment in water and sewage services by providing regulatory certainty to the provider. Okay, in terms of the NURC's role in the tariff review process, the NURC Act, established in 2016 under the National Utilities Regulatory Commissions Act, Chapter 9.01, established the Commission as a statutory body entrusted with the primary responsibility of regulating water, sewage, and electricity supply services in Saint Lucia. In the exercise of its mandate, the NURC is responsible for establishing, monitoring, and reviewing tariff schemes in a manner which is fair, transparent, balanced, and which ensures the interests of all stakeholders are duly considered. In addition, Section 37(1)(c) of the Act highlights a general function of the Commission to establish and approve tariff schemes, while Section 78 to 84 set out the principles and procedures which guide the Commission in its tariff-making functions. The NURC is also guided by the schedules contained in the Water and Sewage Tariff Regulations in undertaking its review of water and sewage rates. The regulations provide detailed steps for making the triennial adjustment, inclusive of the formulae for determining key elements such as the reasonable cost of service, the regulatory asset value, allowable rate of return, and allowed real revenue. The tariff review process, it commences with the development of guidelines and methodologies for tariff calculation, including the setting of minimum filing requirements by the Commission based on the regulations. Also, defining key cost components, including operational expenses, capital investments, and return on investment. Secondly, we have the data collection and financial analysis stage, where the review of the financial performance of the service provider is undertaken to ensure that tariffs support operational efficiency, and also the economic impact assessments are also conducted under this phase to evaluate affordability and cost recovery. Next, we have the regulatory decision-making stage, where the Commission would either approve, reject, or modify the proposed tariff submitted by the utility based on predetermined evaluation criteria. A reasoned decision would be taken by the NURC with legal and economic justification. The next phase would be ensuring transparency and accountability through the conduct of public consultations, such as this one today, and thereafter the final tariff determination would be issued by the Commission. Tariff orders and regulatory decisions would then be published for public access. After this is done, we would have the post-implementation or monitoring stage, where the Commission would ensure continuous monitoring, of the new rates which have taken effect. In conclusion, it is essential for all stakeholders to actively engage in the review process by providing valuable feedback, insights, and comments to support us in establishing fair and effective tariff structures for the Saint Lucian public. So the Commission would consider all feedback received from stakeholders in preparing its final determination on WASCO'S triennial tariff review application. I thank you.
Thank you, CEO NURC Skeeter Gibbs, for establishing the basis for our consultation this morning, and of course informing us of how NURC operates. I need to inform you that we will be taking questions from you after the 3 presentations. We have 2 other presentations, then we will take your questions. We'll have enough time for all of those questions. So at this point, let me invite Ms. Zilte George, the CEO of the Water and Sewage Company Incorporated, to do her presentation.
Master of Ceremonies, please allow me this morning to adopt the protocol that has already been established, but please allow me to welcome Mr. Nove and the group from the NURC here, of course my WASCO managers, and the rest of the general public. Thank you for joining us this morning, and on behalf of WASCO, I wish to thank the NURC for this opportunity so that WASCO can tell our story. So this morning we have public stakeholder consultation number 1. We will be throughout the island for the rest of the week. But for now, we are here with you this morning. The purpose of the exercise today is to explain why the TTR is required under regulation, of course, to share WASCO's current operational and financial realities, to outline planned investments, and to secure reliable water and wastewater services, to ensure transparency, fairness, and stakeholder participation, and of course, to invite feedback from you before any regulatory decision is made. Today we will have an overview, then we will move on to our key initiatives and operational investments. We'll move on to a bit about our business and investment plan, our tariff justification, service standards, and performance targets. I don't want to keep you too long, but I just want to tell you a little bit about, well, Mr. Nove already alluded to the fact that our last increase was in 2013. Of course, our mandate is to provide, manage, and distribute safe and reliable water and sewage services across the island of Saint Lucia. Our primary objective is to maintain a consistent water supply, manage our water resources, and ensure the proper disposal of wastewater. We successfully produce about 220 million imperial gallons of water per day, and we serve about 58,000 customers of varying categories: commercial, residential, hotels, ships and tankers, and of course, government entities. Our service coverage, we serve approximately 90% of the population with direct connections. We have 29 surface water sources, which includes the John Compton Dam, 25 treatment facilities, over 80 storage tanks. In the wastewater department, we have 3 treatment plants in Rodney Bay, Black Bay, and Emerald Development, and of course, service concentrated in the north and in the south. So you would ask, why a triennial tariff review? WASCO is required to submit a TTR application, and this is the second tariff review in the company's history. Our tariffs have not been adjusted since 2013. I think Mr. Nervy already alluded to that, but I think it's important that we reiterate this over and over again, because I'm pretty sure that for most of you, the prices that you paid for almost everything in 2013 are definitely not what you're paying for it now. We have approximately 400 employees, 10 departments. We run a 24/7 operation, and we provide island-wide coverage. Our key functional areas are operations, where we do production, treatment, and distribution of water. We have wastewater services, collection networks, and treatment plants. We also have the customer service unit, which deals with billing, metering, credit control, and customer care. And of course, we have the general support services, IT, finance, HR, strategic planning, and our legal unit. Our key initiatives and operational improvements. I want to touch a bit on that today because I'm pretty sure that everybody's interested in what has happened since 2013. So we had a tariff increase in 2013, and many people are saying, okay, so we had this increase, what has happened? So I want to take some time to deal with our achievements. Our infrastructural improvements. We had network extensions and pipeline replacements, and we did that island-wide. We had bulk metering and pressure management improvements. We, of course, have the state-of-the-art Grace and Beausejour treatment facilities, both in the south of the island. We've refurbished some of our facilities, our Castries depot, our Hill 20 treatment plant, and we've done some Roseau Dam upgrades. We have a new Vieux-Fort facility, construction of a modern facility which improves our staff working conditions, and of course we're better able to serve the customers in the southern region. Our headquarters have been modernized, and we now have better administrative efficiency and work environments. We have a few photos where you can see some of our improvements in the Montsepa area. We've also done recent improvements in the Norbert to Vieux-Sikwe area, which would include water mains and network expansions. We have the Boutor to Colombet expansion, which is also, Boutor is in the south, in Soufrière. So we have an expansion in that area. It was a network expansion as well. In Canaries, we did water mains and network expansions. We've done the Delce intake and treatment plant upgrade in Delce, which is in Choiseul. We've also improved the staff quarters there, as you can see. Technology and our system modernization. I don't know if some of you recall back in the day where before you went to get your bill, you would have to write go on a very long line, and then they need to write what is called a little copy bill, and then you'll have to take that, and then you would need to go to the cashier to make those payments. So we've had modernization in our customer information system, so now you just go straight up to the cash to make your payments. We have an integrated system for improved reliability and user experience. We have an automated balance inquiry, so all you need to do now is stay at your home anywhere, and you could just dial 457-3998, and you'll be able to get your bill balance. So no more waiting to go to the post office to get your balance. You could just do that. You could even be on the beach and be doing it. Seamless account integration across the departments. We have an introduction of automatic account balance system. And as it relates to our operational technology, we have SCADA, which is going to be rolled out in 2024. So we're going to have real-time monitoring. So I see some people here from the Babuno region, and usually they have a lot of complaints about leaking tanks and tanks overflowing. So with our new SCADA system, we're going to be able to remain in our office and know when those things are happening. So we will be able to address them more urgently. We have smart metering installations, and that rollout is of 150 ultrasonic meters. So we have pilot projects throughout the island where we've done that. Climate risk and vulnerability assessment has been completed. We have an adaptation plan of action. We have climate resilient projects, a GCF readiness project, an adaptation fund project, and a GIZ and a CDB project, all for climate resilience. We have a readiness project which is aimed at water security. We have done a hotel and commercial water conservation campaign. We've done domestic conservation campaigns where we had the water tank initiative, which was aimed at encouraging persons to store water. We have also engaged in the Caribbean Green Efficient project, and this is aimed at finding solar and PV panels, so to increase our efficiency. We also have the Carib Sand project, which is a wastewater wetlands project at Black Bay Vieux-Fort. Some of our other major achievements, we have done a cost optimization project. We have water conservation initiatives, which includes the enhancement of programs and initiatives to reduce the demand, including rainwater harvesting. We've done SOPs and staff training, implementation of standardized procedures, and comprehensive training programs. So that's basically what we have done. Now we're going to be moving a little bit into 2024 to 2027, which is the period which we have asked for the review of our tariffs. And I want to tell you a little bit about what we're hoping to achieve. So we're going to reduce our non-revenue water by 45% in 2027. That is our goal. We're hoping to improve service reliability and pressure stability. This will improve our supply hours, it will help to stabilize our pressures, and it will reduce unplanned outages. We are looking towards enhancing our infrastructural resilience. Climate risk, of course, is a challenge for everybody throughout the region, and we're hoping to strengthen our critical assets. We're hoping to expand our service coverage. We want to connect new customers and to extend the service to underserved communities. We want to strengthen our financial sustainability. We want to achieve cost recovery and build prudent reserves. Our capital investment program, our total planned investment for the period 2024 to 2027 is 113.7 million. What are we hoping to do? We're hoping to upgrade and replace the raw water pipeline, which I think almost everybody in this room is aware of, the 5 kilometers of pipeline, which is severely damaged, and we need to ensure the replacement of that pipeline because it's becoming more and more critical. Actually, Mr. King is here with us today, but he has to leave pretty shortly because we have another rupture on that pipeline. And like I tell people, we go to sleep and we wake up and the next day it's just a big rupture. So it's nothing that we can plan. Most of the times the pipe just ruptures because, of course, it has outlived its useful life. Treatment plant rehabilitation. We want to continue with the rehabilitation of our treatment plants. I alluded to the fact that we were able to do Grace and Beauséjour, but our Thebels treatment plant, which is the plant which serves the north of the island, is in dire need, and I'll give you a little bit more information on it a little later, but it's in dire need of rehabilitation. Our transmission and distribution upgrades, of course, are absolutely necessary so that we can reach more customers and we can have less damages. Our wastewater systems need to be improved. We only currently serve about 4,500 customers with wastewater, so we want to improve on that. So JCD raw water pipeline. The investment amount for that is $82.5 million. The upgrades to the Thebes treatment plant, $10 million. The Miku intake upgrade, $10 million. The Northern Pipeline, which is the pipeline that runs from Bonterre through to the Gros-Islet Gap, that pipeline is severely compromised. It's leaking profusely, and that upgrade needs to be done as a matter of urgency, because I'm sure, well, by when we go into Gros-Islet on Tuesday, I'm sure we're going to be getting a lot of customers complaining about the supply to the further northern tip of the island. That pipeline needs to be replaced urgently. That is going to cost us $5 million. Millet and gravity pipeline intakes, another $5 million, and we've allowed for $1.2 million for our sewer projects. Our flagship project is the raw water pipeline, which is the millet pipeline. The degradation of the mild steel triggers frequent shutdowns for repairs. We always have a very tight window in which we need to replace, well, we don't replace, but we sometimes have to replace lengths of it, and most of the time we have to do a lot of patching and a lot of welding of the pipeline. The more we weld the pipeline, the worse it gets. We have to be mindful that the staff, of course, has to be on the lookout for snakes, because the area in which the pipeline is located is smack in the snake region of Saint Lucia. So we have post-repair effects as well. Minor leaks, they worsen, so we may patch one area, and as soon as we patch that area lower down, by another, 2 weeks? Sometimes in 2 weeks' time, we get another rupture lower down because of the compression. We have a lot, as a result of that, we have a lot of unplanned interruptions. This disrupts our operations, and of course, it compromises our supply. So that is a matter of urgency. We need to replace the 5 kilometers of pipeline in Millet. We have a number of issues, of course, because we will continue to have planned interruptions, but we have, of course, a great increase in the number of Airbnbs and hotels in the north of the island, and the level of demand is far higher than that of the network design. So we have no choice at this point but to replace 5 kilometers of the 24-inch raw water pipeline. Our Thebes treatment plant, so the water comes from the John Compton Dam, from Vanna, and it then goes to Thebes treatment plant. And that treatment plant is the largest plant with 10 million gallons production capacity. However, it was originally designed to have 10 filters. Out of these 10 filters, currently, we only have 4 of those filters operating at full capacity right now. We have a corroded compressed air line, and that requires 24-hour backwashing, and of course it will increase our water usage, and we'll have less water to sell to the north. Production interruptions reduce our storage levels and lower distribution pressures. So currently, at peak, we have up to 8.4 million gallons today. We probably have only 6. We only have 6 because of the 2 major leaks that are currently taking place right now as we speak. So typically, I would say we have probably something like 7.1, 7.4 million gallons. So we urgently need US $3.5 million for the rehabilitation of the Thebes treatment plant. The Northern Pipeline, which is the pipeline I spoke of earlier from Bonterre through to the Gros-Islet Gap, it's a 40-year-old pipe. It's very old, and it's in a very aggressive environment, because you would appreciate it's along the area of the marina, so you have a lot of salt water coming in, and of course that aggressive environment has caused the pipe to be severely corroded. It, of course, increases our non-revenue water. It restricts flow and gives us, of course, customers with very low supply. We have high maintenance demand, and we obviously have frequent repairs along that pipeline, so it's unreliable at this point. Our service has become highly unreliable to the extreme northern tip. This is the area where we have quite a few hotels, we have quite a few residents, we even have water, blue waters in the Massad area, so we have quite a number of development in that area, and we're unable to supply a reliable source of water. The dry season, unfortunately for us, that coincides with our peak tourism season, and our demand constantly exceeds our supply capacity in that period. So anywhere from January right through to May, we have very, very serious challenges. We have quite a few large properties that rely on water trucking to meet those needs. We have some remote and high elevation customers that often depend on private truckers, and we even have cases where private truckers can't even get to the customers because of the elevation and the roads that are in that area. The trucks simply cannot go up there. So our valving schedules cannot satisfy all parties during the peak demand. So we try with the valving, but if we don't have enough water, valving is not even going to work. We need better optimization of our limited raw water and treated water resources. We also have a fleet of vehicles, which is, some of them are as old as 24 years. It's no joke. Some of them, the age vehicles on our operations, sometimes we simply don't even have enough vehicles to send our staff out there to offer any proper satisfaction to our customers. We have rising operation costs through higher maintenance and repairs. Of course, that would give us service delays. It would also be a risk to our staff, and it will reduce our quality of service and, of course, our staff productivity. So we really need to be like some of the other utilities that can change their vehicles every 3 to 5 years. So our non-revenue water, we know it's a critical challenge. The historical range is from 47 to 58. It's nothing new to the region or to, other utilities in the region such as ours, but we would like to ensure that at least we can reduce our non-revenue water to at least 42% by 2033, and that has to be through a number of targeted interventions. We need to increase our pressure management, ensure we have active leak control. We need to have better management of our meters, proper data handling, asset management, repair our leaks in a more speedy and faster time frame, and of course to enforce different policies. So we would need to increase our regulations as it relates to theft of water and illegal connections, because that also forms a part of the non-revenue water. Once again, our growing pressures, our aged infrastructure, climate volatility. We have a climate crisis in the region. Well, not even in the region, it's in the world now. Droughts, floods, and landslides, rising operational costs. Our energy costs have skyrocketed. Materials and labor have skyrocketed. Our demand growth is driven by population and tourism. Financial strategy, our funding sources and sustainability. Tariff revenues are the primary source for our operations and maintenance. Cost recovery aligned to reasonable cost of service. Currently, we get governmental support. We also need to look at our loan financing, our long-term debt for larger upgrades with managed debt service obligations is a bit of an issue now, and upfront payments from our new connections and our network extensions. That's basically what we use. Our annual operating expenditure snapshot for 2025. Total expenditure, $78 million. Our human resources, 31.6, approximately 35%, which is the average throughout the region. Our utilities and our power costs. Where did she go to? I saw the legal representative for Lucilec. I see she's not in the room now. But our utility and power costs at $15.3 million. Maintenance service, $4.9 million. Vehicle and equipment cost, $4.2 million. Depreciation, $6.6. So that's where we're at. So why would the tariff adjustment be necessary? After I've outlined and explained all of those reasons, I just want to wrap up. We obviously have an unsustainable financial position. 13 years without an adjustment and recurring deficits. Rising costs of energy, chemicals, and materials. After 13 years, that is expected. Our infrastructure is aging and it will continue to age. We need significant replacement and backlogs to increase our failure, because we have too many failures. We need to improve our service quality. We've gotten somewhere, but we need to take it to the next step. And without that adjustment, there would be continued reliance on government subsidies. We would have deferred maintenance and higher future costs, and an increased risk of service disruptions. Our key drivers again, electricity and energy, chemical costs, maintenance on our aging assets, personnel and admin, regulatory compliance, yes, we do have to pay the NURC, NRW reduction programs, climate resilience investments, and service expansions to new developments. Our current water rates, if everybody in this room would be honest, the current rate at the minimum charge for the domestic category is $24.42. If you take that and you multiply, for some utilities, you probably need to multiply by 10. For others, you may need to multiply by 5. Government, 46.5, commercial, 66.4, and hotel, 73.1. So our capital investment, our expected outcomes, we need more reliable supply, fewer plowed outages. We need to reduce interruptions to the northern residents, lower the physical losses from replaced pipelines, reduce dependence on water trucking, improve pressure stability and our service hours. We need stronger climate resilience of our water systems, better customer service and data accuracy, and we need to meet the health and environmental standards. We want e-billing for all by 2026 for all of our customers. We're hoping to get a reliable 30-day billing cycle, 24/7 customer support. We want to reduce unmetered connections by 50%. We want to ensure that we have proactive outage and planned works, immediate payment application for our primary website, and infrastructure replacement schedules. So it's really a national choice at this stage. It's either proactive investment versus reactive crisis management, sustainable water services versus growing vulnerability, transparency and dialogue versus deferred decisions. Thank you. We move on to any questions that you may have at this time. I hand you over to the, oh, okay. I'll hand you back to Mr. Gasper.
very much, Mrs. Leslie. Very comprehensive. And you know what I noted? She said, we need, over and over. About 6 times she mentioned, we need to. So pay attention. We are moving very quickly, and like I said earlier, we're going to take your questions after this other presentation. So let me now invite Mr. Towan Magdoum. Is he there?
Yes.
Towan, sorry. Okay. Your presentation, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Please allow me to speak under the protocol already established. This morning, I will be taking you through the proposed water and sewage tariff given the triennial tariff review application submitted by WASCO. By way of quick overview, we'll be going through WASCO's proposed rates, the outcome of the NURC's review, the NURC's proposed tariff scheme, the NURC's rationale, as well as our plans moving forward. Okay, here we outline the change in water consumption rates proposed by WASCO in the 2024 application. These rates were proposed as a one-time direct increase and were expected to take place at the start of the triennial period in 2024. Just to help you understand the table, for example, if we look at domestic consumption, it was proposed that a 39.4% increase would take place for the first 2 levels of domestic consumption, and after those, a 36.6% increase would take place on the last level. That would be the tier 2. Moving on, these are the sewer consumption rates proposed by WASCO in their application. These rates were proposed as a phased increase where each year of the tariff review, each year of the triennial tariff review, the sewer rates would increase by a given percentage. If we look at domestic again, look at the base rates if you could, they are expected to increase every year, that is 2024, 2025, and 2026 by 18.6%. Okay, having undertaken a technical analysis of the utilities application via the employment of an independent consulting firm, several adjustments were deemed necessary. These included the use of the company's 2023 balance sheet, as it was more in line with the current asset base presented in the application. There was also a revision of the investment plan that accurately captures the actual investments made by the company during the time delay between the start of the triennial period and the assumed effective date of the new tariff. The company's 2023 income statement was also used to project administration and operating cost figures, as it was deemed a more reliable baseline for projections. And finally, the recalculation of other revenue figures using the more reliable 2023 income statement was also taken as a measure. Okay, having reviewed WASCO's application and making the necessary adjustments, the net present value of both the reasonable cost of service and the current revenue were determined to actually be lower than what was presented by the utility. This would have initially resulted in an increase that was lower than the 42.2% proposed by WASCO. However, given the delays in the process and the assumption of a mid-year effective date, mid-year 2026 effective date, an increase of 64.29% was required. Okay. Having made the necessary adjustments for the tariff determination and considering several economic factors, including the time of implementation, a direct increase of 64.29% in the water and sewage tariff was deemed too abrupt for customers. Therefore, a K-factor or smoothing mechanism had to be utilized by the NURC, as required by the Water and Sewage Act. As such, a phased increase of 37.34% is proposed, where the water and sewage tariff would increase by that 37.34% mid-2026 and again in 2027. The effect of this smooth increase on the water consumption rates are noted in this table. For clarification, that means mid-2026 and early 2027, both sewer and water consumption rates would increase by 37.34%. Those were the water rates. Sewer consumption rates, the same smooth increase of 37.34% is proposed for all categories of sewer. The same methodology was established, the same implementation process will be utilized. A smooth increase mid-2026 and early 2027. In the review of WASCO'S application, the NURC considered several factors in the determination of the proposed tariff structure. The NURC acknowledged the fact that the last adjustment to the water and sewage tariff was 13 years ago. The effect of the final tariff determination on the final determination of the extended delays in the review process, and the fact that the tariff needs to be affordable while allowing for improved quality of service and reliability of service. In the NURC's consideration of affordability, there were quite a few factors that were considered, such as the increase in the minimum wage, which took place last year, I believe, and the resulting increase in overall incomes that increase in the minimum wage had. However, having said this, the eroding effect of inflation on these incomes was also factored into the decision. The inherent cross-subsidization effect of WASCO'S tariff structure was also taken into account. Though it is limited, it does allow for some cushioning of an upward tariff adjustment. Lastly, the affordability threshold formula outlined by the UNDP and the WHO was also consulted to determine the effect that the proposed tariff structure would have on the affordability of water and sewer services. So the proposed tariff did take those into account. The NURC does understand that even with all these considerations made, when developing the proposed tariff structure, that moving forward, additional steps will need to be taken. As such, the NURC will revise its minimum filing requirements to ensure that the review process is more efficient and is done in a more timely manner. The NURC will also work closely with the utility WASCO to ensure a better quality of service by way of improved service standards, which will be incorporated into the service license of WASCO. Finally, the NURC will engage with the Ministry of Equity, Labor, Gender and Elderly Affairs, Social Justice and Consumer Welfare to discuss the development of a subsidy framework that will aid the more vulnerable citizens of Saint Lucia.
All right, there we go. Ready for your questions? We just thank Mr. McDoom for this latest presentation, as well as the presentations before from Ms. Leslie, giving us the rationale for an increase, as well as the presentation that we had from Ms. Gibbs on the legal framework and scope and strategy for this consultation. So I now invite your questions, but let me ask you to state your name and your organization before you ask your question.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much to the presenters for your informative presentations. I am Farzana Leal. I am representing the organization Eastern Caribbean States Commission. And I'd like to know if there's been any consideration of a robust communication strategy to the public in order to facilitate the rollout of the new rates, more specifically to communicate the challenges that WASCO is currently having, and also to have further transparency on the use of funds.
I think the question is two-dimensional. The NURC it will support the utility company, of course. We will develop our strategy for public sensitization, letting the consumers know how WASCO plans on rolling it out. But I think the utility as well has a responsibility to do the same. I don't know if WASCO wants to on their strategy for public sensitization and information of the. You're fine.
Julian French, Musselite. Based on what I read in the report, WASCO seemed to have filed the application in April 2024, but there doesn't seem to be an explanation as to the delay in the process, that we are 2 years after the application and the public consultation is now on. So I'm trying to understand what caused the delay in the application process.
Okay, so the reason is twofold. Firstly, we were awaiting the assistance of a consultant, which was procured with resources from the CDB, and that was finalized last year in 2025. So we needed to await the procurement of the consultant for technical support to the NURC. That's one reason. And then we had several rounds of back and forth with the utility for additional information, clarifications, and so forth. So to adjust the financial model. So that's the main two reasons for the debate.
We are moving very, very well.
Hi, good morning everyone. Jason Ernest, Director, Water Resources Management Agency. Thank you all for the presentation. In the presentation by WASCO, it was mentioned that they were looking for a reduction of less to 45% of non-revenue water by 2027. But I mean, in this important process that we're going through, what about the discipline of the JCD in terms of the costing and probably getting servicing of the JCD in terms of the silt removal to a certain percentage? Was that taken into consideration?
Okay, so the desilting of the JCD is not a current project. I think I itemized all the current projects that we have on stream. But of course, during the period between now and 2027, we're hoping to conceptualize another phase of that project.
Just a follow-up to Mr. Ernest's question regarding the John Compton Dam. It seems to me that the Water Resources Management Agency is being paid for an abstraction license. And is it that WASCO is responsible for making the water available? Or is it that the Water Resources Management Agency is supposed to be ensuring that the catchment has water because WASCO is paying a license to abstract? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Mr. John. You are absolutely correct, because Water Resource Management Agency is responsible for finding new sources. They're responsible for ensuring that the supply is there, because that is why we pay them. So we are just here to produce the water that they should be making available to us. That's exactly how it works.
Well, my name is Lucius Doxery, Joe Public. So let me thank you very much for the presentation. Of course, I didn't have the time to really digest it properly, and I'm hoping that at some time in the future, the documents and the presentations could be made available so that better questions can emanate from the consumption of the presentations. Having said that, I want to find out what is the percentage as it pertains to government subvention of WASCO's annual budget.
The microphone. You have the mic. Yeah, can I have your microphone, please? Yes.
I do have a follow-up question.
Yeah. Well, ask both
Ask that
then.
one as well.
Okay.
So, what comes to mind as well, and that has been alluded to throughout the presentation, it has to do with carrying capacity of WASCO. So we talk about more hotels, more developments, etc. Does WASCO have a forecast, a blueprint for the future, where it can forecast as to the number of hotels? And by the way, are discussions from the DCA, for example, does WASCO have a rep on the DCA? Because when it comes to huge or major infrastructure, clearly WASCO. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's a lot better. Yeah. WASCO would have to be instrumental and pivotal to any current and future developments in the country. So we're talking about forecast and whether WASCO has a forecast plan in terms of carrying capacity for the company. Now, I also want to ask whether there are any restrictions for WASCO to engage in business initiatives. So for example, and I am very ignorant, lacking knowledge, so I'm asking the basic questions. You see a lot of trucking companies around. Is WASCO engaged, or can WASCO be engaged in that kind of business? And for example, bottling as well. A lot of water from WASCO is being utilized by bottling companies. Can WASCO, as a business entity, initiate this kind of initiatives? So these are some for now, and thank you for the time.
We currently receive $1.2 million a month from government, which is about 23% for the year. So 1.2 monthly. You also asked about the DCA. Yes, we do have a rep on the DCA, and we also engage the SLHDA as well. So there is a bit of dialogue with those agencies. And there's absolutely nothing, I don't think, that restricts us from entering into those initiatives.
So are you contemplating?
Thank you very much, Mr. Gaspar, and let me thank the presenters for very enlightening presentations. Further to the points raised on the timeliness of the data that is being used to have the public understand the need for new rates. It seems to me almost like WASCO is at a point where they may have to go back to the drawing board to have appropriate information to go to the public, because the questions that the Lucilec posed are questions any ordinary person would ask. So I think that is a little bit of a challenge in WASCO making this case, the data that is being used. But more importantly, I would like to get from WASCO a sense as to what is the level of compliance you have with your existing rates in terms of consumer payment of their responsibilities to you for the consumption that they have right now, whether commercial or domestic. What is your level of compliance with respect to payments? Because that, in my mind, would indicate the capacity or appetite for the consumer to undertake payment of additional rates. And while I noted the position, the information that was considered by the regulatory economists in terms of the increase in the minimum wage or the existence of a minimum wage. The other question in my mind is if the rates that currently exist were not being adhered to, and I take note of the level of support government had to give the consuming public, the people of Saint Lucia, by way of SSDF support in terms of the capacity to meet the daily needs. When you look at the rate of increase from government or by SSDF to the same consuming public, that indicates to me that while we have had an increase in the minimum wage, there seems to be an incongruence between that and the level of support, direct support government is giving to the same consuming public. And with that type of information, how do you then ask the public to pay even higher rates, as you're suggesting now? So these are some of the pieces of information I'm seeing that I think we need to take into consideration as we consider the increase in rates. I am not saying that WASCO'S, because your proposed plans are very, very critical. Let me commend you, in fact, for outlining what needs to be done going forward. These are all critical ones. The issue now is, how do you finance this? And if it's not tariff financing that you will use, then you need to explore alternative sources of financing, which is where Mr. Doxery's arguments, I believe, have value for consideration. Thank you, bro.
Jabati's Public Relations Officer. My question is, what measures are taken in place for the most vulnerable when it comes to protecting life and livelihoods, and with the cost of living, future pandemics, and also natural disasters?
Okay, so the NURC was mindful of those issues and ensuring that persons from the most vulnerable categories would be able to afford the rates. And we have plans to engage the Ministry of Equity and the government of Saint Lucia to discuss targeted subsidies for those vulnerable groups.
Good morning, Winnie Pierre, representing Ministry of Health. Just a clarification, more or less. When it comes to the treatment facilities, a lot of what was made mention in terms of the increasing cost, the old infrastructure and the repairs to be done, a lot of it was focused in the north. But we are also aware that facilities in the south, that complete in terms of treatment. Is the overall proposal taking into consideration looking at southern treatment facilities for water? The reason I ask against the backdrop as well, if that's going to be used for the justification, barring the cost of for the utilities like electricity, the customers in the south, maybe in Vieux-Fort, they say, well, this does not apply to me. I don't get my water from that source. I'm just looking at it in that way. So is there a plan development over that period of time that is taken into consideration? Because we know that some of the facilities, perhaps in the south, are not quite complete as it should be. And I'm just asking the question against these factors. Secondly, in terms of the increase on the tariff, you made mention of the cost that the government is currently making on a monthly basis. Is there a comparative increasing cost that the government would make in terms of inflation and so on?
For the first one, we actually do have two brand new state-of-the-art facilities in the south of the island, which would be the Great and Negotiation facility. So I'm not sure why you would think that we have not focused on it. I probably didn't focus on it now because it was done between 2013 and now, and I think I alluded to that. And in addition to that, we have in Dennery as well, Tomato treatment plant, a brand new state-of-the-art facility. So the facilities in the north are far greater and far more responsive, I would say, than those we have here in the south, better than those in the north. Yeah. So there has been significant improvement to the southern region between 2013 and now.
Dorothy Egod. The rate increase that is proposed, one had 64, one had 37 points. I need to know, because as a consuming public, WASCO has put a proposal from 2023. The information given to me is arcade as far as I'm concerned, because I needed to get more relevant information, relevant figures, because to me it does not add up for me. Secondly, the increase, because WASCO doing different businesses, they have the sewer, they sell water to the cruise ship, which is
Now, when I see commercial or other at the same rate, I cannot think that I am paying taxes, paying subsidies to WASCO, and I'm paying the same price with a ship that comes to Saint Lucia to buy water. I think that rate, yes, should have increased tremendously compared to this. If we don't even have water to supply to our people and our people have to pay an increase of that much, why are we going to be selling the cruise ship water the same rate at the same commercial rate? I think that should be looked into. Okay? And thirdly, the trucking public is helping WASCO. So when I'm seeing that $125 being proposed, that means $8 a gallon. Come on. Is anybody going to buy $8 a gallon for water? When I look at the proposed price for 2027, we are here to have businesses continue, not to crash businesses in Saint Lucia. Thank you.
Thanks again for your wonderful presentations. My name is Donald Florius, representing EcoCarb, and I'm also a business developer for HDF Energy, or Adrian Falls for short. Now, my key question is that we've all seen that water security is essential, and with more people looking to actually take control of their water situation, as the Prime Minister has recently proposed they do, through water catchment and things of that sort. I know a lot of commercial businesses, hoteliers, have already taken as much control as they can by implementing methods to save and conserve water. Has this been taken account into the model? Because with these increases, outside investment for hoteliers to expand on these activities becomes a lot more bankable. And also for residents, your demand may be reduced because they would rather capture their own water as opposed to using more from us.
You get
Okay, thank you for the question. What we would say to that is, based on our projections in terms of supply versus demand, water conservation is not something we can really quantify. So you have to estimate that, okay, you operating on a worst case scenario, because the truth is we operating at a deficit currently in terms of the supply versus demand. So any benefits which are reaped in terms of persons conserving water and other, let's say, commercial or hotels reducing on their consumption, what it does is it improves the situation for the general public, but it's not something that we can really project. But as things progress, we monitor the situation in terms of our supply versus demand, and then maybe in the next review, then we can better account for it. But at this stage, there's just too much uncertainty in that area.
First of all, let me see presentations, very good presentations, very informative, or as one of our world leaders currently would say, beautiful. My issue here is really Patrick Matre, one from Saint Lucia Flex Association, but Patrick Matre is the name. In terms of the timelines, because I think that is critical for me in terms of timelines. We have information that is presented, and the information is post-dated, so we will definitely need new information, but WASCO needs to move on. As I see it, and as a consumer, WASCO needs those tariff increases. Needs. There's no two ways about it. It means, therefore, that you presented three scenarios, which was the discussion. The second one and the third one was emergency. That's why I put emergency. I think it's critical that there should be some discussion about some emergency tariffs increase for WASCO,
so that they could continue whilst we do that type of deeper dive into current data so that we get a proper increase. So if it means that for the next year and a half or next 2 years, because you see, when you look at the figures, it's kind of frightening to say that we have an increase in June and 6 months later we have an next increase. As a consumer, it's frightening. So I think that consideration should be made in terms of emergency measures so that we could grant RASP some level of relief, and then we would look again at the current data to ensure that as we go forward, that the rates would be slightly increased in the way that you've suggested. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me a second chance, Mr. Gaspar. The issues of raised by Mr. Dossery, I believe, are very important. When those rates increase, they don't go back down. So you're looking at a shift in the level of pricing. And my good friend here is absolutely right. We need to do something in the short term. But a couple of issues. One is WASCO did not speak to, well, I guess the people for sourcing of water might be the ones, Mr. Jacques, or how you call it, desalination. Is that a consideration in the from the sourcing of water for WASCO to use? I'm not sure. Is there anything preventing the hoteliers who are critical from doing that to produce water for themselves, reducing the overall demand that WASCO has to provide them, given the current situation? I'm not sure, but we did hear those things. I am not saying it is your responsibility, but that will help the consuming public understand better. And very importantly for me, I think WASCO, in your consultations in the public, really need to give us a clear outline as to what you intend to do with respect to other sources of generating revenue, as Mr. Dossery said. And I think, Zilta, you said there is nothing preventing WASCO from considering bottling of water, from considering the other areas, trucking, but he's doing trucking already, but at least the bottling of water. With respect to trade in water, we have a market in the OECS for bottled water, which is what Blue Waters is using very well right now. You're using your own water. So I'm thinking, why not utilize those available avenues? I don't know what the investment will be, but we're looking at long-term shifts in prices, and to me, consideration should be given when speaking to the public as to how feasible that would be, as opposed to not feasible at all. So for me, the completeness of the discussion is important as we consider the rate increases. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Preville. At this stage, I can say that we have not ruled out desalination. It's something that we actually have started discussions on, so we've not ruled it out. As it relates to the hotels, you made mention of many of the hotels, especially in the north, have their own fully functioning desalination plant. I remember you made mention to the fact of the demand, and in addition to them having those fully functional plants, they still require our water. So we don't really see that there would be a need for them not to be taken over for the demand to decrease. So I think about of the major hotels in that northern region where we have the shortfall, 3 out of probably 4 or 5 of them already have fully functional desalination plants.
My name is Chad Hunt. I am representing the Ministry of Equity. Like indicated that we will be having discussions forward, but as I'm here now, they mentioned that you'll have about 80 tanks, island-wide, 80 tanks, or like water tanks, like large water tanks, about 80. And I in the whole discussion, there was nothing about increasing the amount of tanks on island in terms of storage, because most times you have areas where there is an increase in the residency, and at that point in time, that tank was able to supply the community, but the amount of residents has increased. And I think that is something to increase, because also is if you in the process of increasing the price of water, then the people want to know that the supply will be available in many communities. That will be a huge complaint that where water is somewhat seemed rationed, where several communities do not get water for the entire day, or sometimes every other day, or in these kinds of patterns. Also, bring up something regarding what Mr. Duxbury brought up. There is something called lucid energy. I don't know if any of you have heard about it before. It's a system where they use existing water pipes and use the gravity for turbine producing electricity. So that could be something to consider as well. But since we're going to have the discussion with my ministry, I will hold any other further questions.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
I'm representing the National Consumer Association of Saint Lucia. There's 2 points.
And the name is?
Tekla Lewis.
Thank you.
President of the National Consumer Association. One, we have no issues with the increase because we do understand the justification, although we would want to understand the disparity in data in the proposed prices with NURC and WASCO. So I guess at some point that information will be disseminated. And also, with the increase, would consumers still be paying a full bill even when they have 2 weeks or 3 weeks of interrupted water? What process would put in place? Because you're paying for a service, the service is interrupted, and you still pay for the full service. What process will be put in place to ensure that factor does not continue to affect consumers of Saint Lucia? Thank you.
I can take that. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Currently, you only pay for what you use. So there's a minimum charge which is $24.42. So if you only get water for 1 week, your meter will only record what you use. So customers don't pay for what they don't get. You only pay for what you get.
Madam CEO, there are times consumers don't get water at all. For the 4 weeks, I've known areas with the complaints. Even in the very Babono, where we have Hill 20, which is a water catchment area, I have received complaints, the NCA, from persons from Gara, 4 weeks no water, but they still have to pay the basic use of the $18,000 that they never received. And we're just hoping that there is some give and take. If you're going to pay for a service, you're going to pay for a standard rate of receiving, whether it's 1 week of water or half week of water. If you do not get no water at all, there should be some consideration, because WASCO is quite cognizant of the areas who do not get water, and I'm sure that they get the complaints. And I just use Gara in Babono as an example, but there are more examples in the north, Beausejour, where some persons have to get trucked water. Some of them pay for their water themselves. So what will be put in place? Because I think it is a consumer concern, and we are inundated with information from the public, especially for that.
The minimum charge of water is the minimum charge of water. So the consumer would have to pay the $24.42. It's sort of like a rental for the service. So that will not change. But you also need to take into account the fact that WASCO trucks water, which is far greater than $24.42, to those very same customers at no cost to them. So I think that's where the give and take would come. Anybody wants to add? You want to add anything?
Good morning. My name is Jim King, the Water Services Manager also. I would just like to add that I understand what you were saying, and in some instances there are revisions of bills when persons have not received water for, let's say, 2 weeks. the bills are higher than the standard bill. We do have revisions of bills, for example. Also, we do talk to persons who provide us with information when they are suffering such situations. We do talk to them. So it's something that I guess the communication between the general public and our entity has to improve so that these situations can be targeted and dealt with on a one-to-one basis.
Again, I must say that the affected public do get water trucked to them. And the thing is that WASCO needs to put out that PR to let the public know, because when no water in Grand Riviere, all the other areas, WASCO do provide the water, and it can be in buckets, in whatever the people have. Sometimes a truck actually stays 3-4 hours delivering water to little buckets and little pails. And they have some places, people build homes, and I'm wondering whether it's Superman or whatever it is they need to bring that water, because it is extremely difficult for those truckers to go up there. And sometimes you spend 3-4 hours up on that little hill to carry water. They do give service in areas where they don't have water, but what WASCO do not do is let people know, okay, the truck is passing in that area, so all persons who need water, contact the drivers. The drivers do give you the water if you stop them, but WASCO is not, because sometimes people think that is people's personal water, when it is not. It's water WASCO is sending to distribute to that particular area. But WASCO needs to let the public know that water is coming in this area at that time, and everybody be aware. So if you all increase your PR, I guess the flag you're getting from the public will be a lot less, because you all are providing a service.
I think most people concur. Ignatius Jean, Executive Director of the Caribbean Water and Sewage Association. I think in the document that I read and the presentations this morning, you made reference to the key factor to make provisions for investment, and I think that's where I think the loose select table were concerned about the level of investment and how it is factored going forward. But I think generally there's consensus that if you do not give that kind of increase to WASCO, they're already operating at a deficit, both for their income and with their supply. It means that they would not be able to sustain the supply for the level of demand. And so one of the things I believe that I didn't hear of is whether they made a provision for, of course there's usually also an X factor which you didn't include, but for the Z factors in some other jurisdictions, because of our vulnerabilities and such as what we have with dealing with exogenous shocks. For example, treating with the John Compton Dam, although my good friend here may not agree with me, but there should be a factor where, albeit that you will have to make provisions for damaged systems that you're going to have in the catchments. Because with, say we had the November 6 rains, which may have destroyed some of the infrastructure. Where you have the catchments, WASCO has to have a provision. So that has to be factored in the cost. And what we've seen in the report, and I think sometimes as indicated, enough of the utility itself has not done a good job in communicating with the public its real issues. That for example, loose select, when you look at the numbers, is about 40% of your cost of operations. And there's no way you can continue to survive without factoring or making a case so that you can have an adjustment in the tariff without having to go back to the regulator and wait 3 years. So that, similar to what loose select does, when there are changes in the cost of fuel, that they have a mechanism to make that adjustment. I think likewise, WASCO should be able to be in a position to pass the cost on to the consumers to make that adjustment, because otherwise they will not be able to get the water to the top of those hills. The other challenge that I know in another place is that WASCO sometimes has to say no. There are developers, there are people who wish to invest, but WASCO will say we cannot supply you with water. Hotels, yes, they do have a backup system of having desal systems, but their business is not producing water. Their business is doing hotel accommodation. So they would prefer to pay WASCO again because of the high cost of energy. So I think that consideration should be factored in having that tariff adjustment somewhere to give WASCO that space to be able to offer the high quality of service. Similarly, if people with the most expensive bill that you have to pay, utility bill, is which one? Energy, right? But we pay it. It's the first bill we all pay. Because when we get home, we know when you turn on the lights, there's electricity. You can charge your phones, you can cook. Talk is cheap. It used to be. But we pay more money for this to talk 24/7. But water is life. I rest my case.
Thank you very much. Chairman Francis, Energy Officer, Department of Infrastructure, Port Services and Transport. Sorry, and Energy. We have to change our ministry name. Yeah, we mentioned a while ago desalination. One thing we need to know, desalination is very, very energy intensive. And already WASCO is crying out for a Gros-Islet bill. So more desalination that happens, that means cost of energy will increase for WASCO and eventually pass on to the customers. So in that regard, the government of Saint Lucia is seeking to promote the use of renewable energy for WASCO to use in the water delivery and water treatment, and that is evident through our Caribbean Energy and Green Efficiency Building. That's a project that CEO mentioned a while ago. That's a CJ project. So we are hoping to have more renewable energy integrated in the whole system of WASCO in delivering and treating the water. That will be government's commitment.
Good morning. My apologies for my very late show, but I did profit the opportunity to review the documents that we shared, and I noted a couple of things. I noted. Oh, they went to my box. I noted some of the adjustments made by the consultants in terms of using WASCO's last audited financial statements. I noted some of the adjustments in terms of the projections, but I noted that the consultants did not speak specifically to whether the system on the tariff system that was used for WASCO, whether it was the ideal, whether it was the most economical, whether it was the most socially beneficial. It didn't look at that, raise that question or question that thought. Is it adequate? So I don't know if, I know how we look at these things evolve over time. And in another life, there was the issue of looking at long-term average incremental costs as being one of the sounder approaches to tariffs. I don't know if that has changed. I haven't followed the literature. But I found it strange there was no commentary on that. Are we trying to satisfy what needs to be satisfied using the appropriate tariff structure? And I thought that would really inform how we then look at what is happening. I caught the tail end of the comments by my good friend, Mr. Jean. And again, that brings to light whether the tariff structure is adequate for the times. I did not pick up in the report any specific commentary about how we deal with replacement of the system in the long term. So after this lived this useful life, are we suddenly going to be in a position where we say, where are we going to get the funding to replace? Or are we going to build in from the tariff charge a mechanism to deal with our accumulation of resources for replacement? And I'm not saying we didn't. I'm not sure if I missed it in the philosophical, in the theoretical approach. But I think it is extremely important that we satisfy ourselves that that is done. The other point that came to mind, crossed my mind, was that we are corrected and said we're using I think we started about more appropriate costings. But my question is, if we're doing, they belabored the point that the initial suggestion or the initial proposal was for the project and the tariff to be implemented in 2025. So there's an issue of time lag. But they didn't then go on to the logical part, which I thought is important. We seem to have a crisis of execution in Saint Lucia, where we have a project and it takes forever to get it going, it takes forever to actually do it, the crisis of implementation, I should say. Have we factored in how we're going to deal with delays in implementation? Because one of the assumptions is that we will get the funding to do the execution in 2026. If we don't, how does that affect the tariff and how we apply the tariff? These were some things that, unfortunately, I didn't go through it thoroughly enough to figure out if these concerns are substantive. But I thought that they did stand out in my mind, and I wanted to raise it as public questions that we could ask, or the consultant could ask us, could answer, because I think the Chamber of Commerce is very clear. We support the point that, water is an economic good as well as social and health good, and therefore must balance how we price it. At the same time, there must be adequacy pricing, because pricing reflects value. And if we do place value on water and the supply of water and all the benefits it provides to us as citizens and as a nation, then maybe therefore we need to rethink what pricing and value we place on it. No, I'm not asking for higher prices. I saw you smiling. No, but we're saying adequate pricing, but I think it's extremely important to do that. And the reliability and the quality of supply is equally important. And just to throw some shade, because Zilta will not throw shade. Just before I came in, a member sent a comment, because they were aware I was coming here, that we need to say to WASCO that 10 members of my staff have not got water for 2 weeks and they're not coming to work. And I say that joking, but the truth is the adequacy and quality of the service is extremely important, and therefore maybe we need to test about that when we think about what is the adequate price. Thank you.
Just a brief response to some of your comments, Mr. Luigi. The tariffs, the adjustments were set based on the water and sewage tariff regulations, the guidelines set therein, and the rates are set to ensure that the net present value of the cost, efficiently incurred cost, equal the net present value of the revenue for the period under consideration. So those guidelines were used in setting the rates.
And also my question was, is this relevant and adequate at this time?
I understand your question, but for now we have to go in.
I know you have to go to
based on the legislation.
but I was
please.
hoping that as consultants, you would at least comment faster on the adequacy of what you've been asked to do. Because if the adequacy is inherently challenged, then whatever outcomes we have will more than likely not satisfy those honorable intentions and objectives. So I was just saying that it would have been wonderful to have had a commentary on that.
Mr. Luigi, to answer that portion of your question, in the draft report on the NURC's website, it gives a full report breakdown from our consultant. It did recommend some changes to the methodology as well as service standards and so on. They did point out faults with the current situation and they made recommendations for adjustment.
Thank you, Mr. Gasper. I was just wondering, when we leave here this morning, as the public here, what is the takeaway that we are agreeing or we are ourselves assessing, we are communicating to WASCO? What is the takeaway? My humble assessment is that we're saying to WASCO, I think it's very clear, we recognize there is a need for a tariff increase. We recognize that perhaps the data we have now that recommends that tariff increase perhaps is dated, and that should not be the basis on which we award that tariff increase at this point. That perhaps there should be an emergency increase to WASCO, and then we use relevant data to come up with a proper tariff increase based on the current data, taking into consideration some of the comments that Brian, for instance, will have just made in terms of appropriateness of methodology and the timeline. So I just wanted to know if you could perhaps summarize, or someone just let us see that we are all on the same page, because that's my takeaway from IGO. Because I don't think anybody is saying yes, we agree with this. We agree for tariff increase, but what tariff increase to me is what the question is.
Okay, so
just to add to Titus' question, but to say this of was the intention of this consultation to be one that made final and ultimate recommendations? Because I'm listening to how Titus phrased his comments, because I wanted to say thank you for the wonderful start to the dialogue. and no, we and this is very serious. Telling us something, showing us something is not consultation. I did attempt to go through what I did a fairly decent job, but I like to go through these types of work a few times for me to really get it. That's why I sought the clarification, because I know I missed something. But I also want to speak to my members so they fully understand, because the business community may very well say, if you're going to give us this quality of service, we will gladly pay this. But maybe WASCO needs something more from the business community, so that WASCO is in a better position and has the capacity to do what we all wish and expect of a decent water and sewage company. Because I, for one, think that this thing of having WASCO as a corporation and expected to operate on a profit and loss basis totally forgets the significant social contribution water has and is playing. I grew up knowing about bilharzia. Ask anybody below 30 if they know what bilharzia is. And the reason bilharzia is not a common thing is because of the tremendous work that has happened in our country with potable water. One of our goals in the 80s was to have a standpipe within reach of every community. Imagine that's where we've come from, and now everybody wants a pipe in their house. But if we do not sensitize and appreciate fully what the water sector is doing, we will be upset because WASCO makes a loss and WASCO has a $50 million debt. $50 million debt for 180,000 people over 40 years to be living. Come on. You know, so I think we need to have this conversation and, you know, get people to understand. And so therefore their contributions will be more substantive. And I think it's a noble objective what we're trying to do with water and water.
So I would just like to say that this report that was circulated for public feedback, it's a draft. It's the draft tariff determination. And according to the law, we're guided by the Water and Sewage Act and the accompanying regulations. The public, we put it out, the NURC is mandated to put out that draft report for public feedback. And there's also an opportunity for written comments to be sent to the NURC. And all of the feedback received would be taken into account in adjusting what is in that draft report. So it's not the final iteration, but according to the law, the commission considers feedback in adjusting and preparing the final determination.
Let me thank all of you for your participation. Very good, very interesting discussions and comments. I think it was quite thorough. And again, let me ask for another round of applause. Thank you so much to our presenters. And I will ask Mrs. Manandra George Roberts to do the vote of thanks.
So good morning. It is my privilege to have been asked to give the vote of thanks on this important occasion that brings together a broad cross-section of stakeholders within the water and sewage sectors. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the many persons who have contributed in various ways to ensure that this stakeholder consultation for the triennial tariff review was a huge success. It augurs well to see so many persons coming forward to be involved in our concerted efforts to sensitize critical stakeholders of developments in the water and sewage sector. Ladies and gentlemen, an event like this cannot happen overnight. The wheels started rolling weeks ago. It required extensive planning and attention to details, while keeping the bigger picture in view. We have been fortunate enough to be supported by a team of highly skilled and motivated professionals within the NURC Secretariat. To the Chief Executive Officer of the NURC, Mrs. Skeeter Gibbs, and team, your hard work is exceedingly appreciated. Thank you to our esteemed moderator, Mr. Michael Gasper. We are tremendously appreciative of your contribution and support. I must express further gratitude to the CEO of the NURC for a comprehensive, concise, and informative presentation. Your insights will be a catalyst for the empowerment and education of our stakeholders. I must also graciously thank our chairman, Mr. Lawrence Nove, and by extension, members of the Board of Commissioners, for their commitment and sterling efforts to ensure the success of this event. And as we say, we save the best for last. You, our distinguished guests, we thank you for your presence, undivided attention, and engagement. We look forward to your continued partnership as we work together towards conducting a successful tariff review. I conclude by echoing the popular adage, knowledge is power. With this resolve, I encourage you to continue to visit the NURC's website and social media pages for further information and developments during the tariff review process. Thank you.